Wow, I just had one of the most incredible experiences of my life. I have never felt this impactful, this having this much of an influence as I did right now today. I'm at this conference in Paris. It's a civil society organization conference, meaning the French government invited Palestinian Israelis, civil society activists, and organizations for basically a day of working groups around issues relating to peace between Israelis and Palestinians. Okay, so it was 8 working groups on different issues in 2 slots. So each of us got to go to basically 2 sessions. I went to 2 whole sessions. The first session was about something called narratives, about changing narratives and fighting narratives. And the other one, which of course had to do with education and media and hate speech and things related to that, dialogue groups, healing, reconciliation. The other group that I went to was had to do with humanitarian aid and reconstruction. And there, I was given the job of recorder. Now that sounds like some kind of secretarial job. It wasn't a secret. I mean, it was a little bit of secretarial skills in the sense of like what I was doing, but basically, I was simultaneously preparing a document that summarized what was being said in terms of a very specific template. Right, we had to talk about the challenges and the goals and the action items. Why was it so specific? We spent 2 hours doing that, and I was using the skills that I've accumulated over like a zillion years of doing this, right? So that 5 minutes later, literally 5 minutes later, we ran into this room where we had a Zoom call with the UN, with an international team of UN representative diplomats who next week will be sitting working on hashing out a peace plan. And what they were doing was we were reporting what we had just done, meaning that we reported to them what a conversation, a roundtable with 25, 30 civil society organizations had said. We were recording what people on the ground want to see happen. And they were there taking notes. And then they were comparing what they had done. They said, oh, yeah, we had come to these conclusions. It was so great to hear you all describe things. And now certain things came up over and over again. One thing that came up in almost every single group was the importance of women, that we need to be hearing from women, that women's voices, women's ideas, women's expertise needs to be front and center. Every group. And they said, yeah, they kept hearing it. Another thing that kept coming up is the importance of civil society organizations, of activists on the ground. It's been so lacking. I mean, I'm feeling like I could breathe for the first time because after 3 years in which Israelis have been pounding the streets in protest while the government doesn't give a damn, while the government doesn't care, the government does what it wants, right? Suddenly here we have this international panel saying we want to hear from you and we must hear from you. Your voices are central here. And so, we know how important this is. We know that top down solutions don't work. They don't work. In many contexts, in a zillion contexts. My husband does international development in India. There too, top down solutions from the outside don't work. Everything has to be grassroots. If you're not coming, it's not just about listening to the grassroots, it's about emerging from the grassroots. It's that the only solutions that have any meaning are ones that emerge from real life, right? It's real life and real people. Anyway, to be in this room where for an hour over the Zoom, the teams who were responsible for these 8 groups, one after another, spent basically 10 minutes summarizing their recommendations for actions to these diplomats in the UN who next week are going to be putting this down into action for the international world, for the world to do, for the UN to do. I have never in my life felt this impactful. Never. I've never felt this heard. I feel like 30 years worth of ideas forming, of work, of connections suddenly are heard and seen and are being taken to meaningful places. Wow, I can't even and everybody there was like, oh my God, that was like the most amazing thing I've ever done in my life. That was like the most amazing thing we've ever done. And we're doing it. And I feel like for years I've been like screaming. I've been screaming, we need to listen to women. We need to listen to women. Women need to be around the table. I've been screaming this for a zillion years. and suddenly it's here. We're there. The room, almost all the teams were, mixed men and women, mixed Israeli Palestinian. This whole day is mixed Israeli Palestinian, even though 40 Gazans couldn't come. There was a group that they were prevented from coming, even though there were so many obstacles to get here. And of course, we're all facing obstacles. None of us knows how we're getting home. Nobody here knows how we're getting home, or where we're going to be sleeping tomorrow night, or when this conference is over. So it's a big mess. And despite that mess, and despite very real fears about what's going on, in Israel and the West Bank and in Gaza, 60 Gazans were killed today. Okay, somebody mentioned that on one of the groups. While we're sitting here, 60 Gazans were killed. Okay, so all of this is happening. So those fears are real and they're present, but we did it anyway. We sat down and we did the work. Wow, this was like one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had in my life. Wow. And now apparently President Macron is going to speak now, so I'm going to run through that. Wow.